Welcome to Stemiverse podcast episode 31. In this episode, Peter and Marcus talk with Joy Suliman. Joy is the Learning Space Coordinator at Library Services for the City of Canada Bay, one of Sydney's most multicultural suburbs. Joy brings together her diverse experience in learning, technology, workshop facilitation, research, professional development training, regional outreach, and community engagement in her role with City of Canada Bay Libraries. She leads a multi-disciplinary team that works alongside the community at the learning space, the connection Rhodes, providing access to online resources and a wide range of programs focusing on digital and emerging technology such as 3D printing, augmented reality, robots, and electronic making. In her previous roles as the digital media facilitator for Save the Children New South Wales, as Senior Fellow at Queensland University of Technology, and before that, Thinkspace Manager at the Powerhouse Museum, Joy has researched, developed and implemented innovative STEAM workshop programs and resources for community, school groups, teachers and cultural organisation professionals. She's also worked at the University of Western Sydney, Arab Council Australia, ABC Local Radio, and the University of Wollongong. This is Stemiverse podcast episode 31. Welcome to Stemiverse, the podcast that helps educators become awesome at teaching STEM, be it at home or in the classroom. I'm Peter Dalmaris, and with my co-host Marcus Schappi, our mission is to bring you the experiences of educators, students and stakeholders who strive every day to make the teaching and learning of science, technology, engineering, mathematics and art better.
This podcast is brought to you by Tech Explorations, a leading provider of educational resources for makers, STEM students and teachers. For a limited time only, go to texplore.com/Stemiverse and receive Peter's latest ebook, Maker Education Revolution, a book about how making is changing the way that people learn and teach in the 21st century.
Hey Marcus.
Hey Peter.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's
and
nice
welcome
to be
back to 2018.
Yes, I can't believe it's already 2018. Just makes you feel older each year, doesn't it?
Oh man, it's just accelerated. Time is just going faster and faster every year. Did you have any holidays?
I did last week. I went to Brisbane and the Gold Coast actually. Took the family up there by the beach. It was nice. Pretended not to work. It was fantastic.
It's like a pilgrimage to
the in-laws,
right?
Extended family and what have you. Yep, you go up there and you have to put your watch back an hour and 50 years, right?
Yeah, it's like you travel to a different place when I go to Brisbane.
Yeah, it's actually...
in a good way, I mean, right? I like it.
They're actually quite ahead of us when it comes to the STEM side of things as well. It's quite...
Did you read any books?
Amazing. Did I read any books? No, I just did writing actually, the other way around.
Did you code?
I did a little bit of code as well.
Did you do Ruby stuff?
I did Ruby stuff, yes. Yeah.
I love it. That's a way to have a holiday, I think.
Yes.
Everybody's listening.
Did a lot of automation. What did you do?
Well, I actually did quite a bit of work, but I also did a bit of reading. I caught up with all my New Scientist magazines.
Okay, you're brilliant.
Leo, who's my oldest son, likes me to read him articles from the New Scientist. Mm-hmm. Did you know there are birds that actually use fire like humans?
Yeah, the hawks up in the Northern Territory.
Exactly, yeah. Like they look for twigs that are lit up and they use them to flush out the next victim or meal.
Yeah. I found
so
it quite amazing. It's like, the definition of intelligence of being able to use a tool and what makes us separate as humans is rapidly going away.
Learn. They can teach.
Yeah, the
babies.
Taught the offspring, yeah.
So I thought that was quite interesting, like that education thing is not, it seems like it's not just centered around humans.
Swinging it around.
Yes,
this is a pro.
That's how we get into education. Hey, I think we should say hi to Joy.
Yes. Who is Joy?
Hey, Joy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sorry we kept you waiting. We just get excited about a few things.
Yes.
No. I really am into that story of the birds that make fire also.
No, I'll share that
about
article with you. I just remember to send it over. It was very interesting.
I heard about them on the radio the other day, and I was like, yeah, right. That's not a myth. It's not like a mythological story or something like that. It's actually a real thing. Birds that make fire. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to formally welcome you. So Joy Suliman, and you're actually the first guest of Stemiverse for the year. So double welcome.
Yes, welcome.
Could you take a few minutes and tell us about you and a few points in your life that eventually brought you to where you are now?
Well, my name's Joy Suliman. I'm the Learning Space Coordinator for City of Canada Bay Libraries here in Sydney. And the Learning Space is one of Sydney's newest library services, and we're in Rhodes. And I guess the reason why we're not called the Rhodes Library is because it's a little bit problematic. We don't have any physical books or any physical collections here. So the drive here is around engaging our community, and one of the main ways we do that is programs that use emerging and digital technologies. So we run a lot of stuff for the community in 3D printing, coding, robotics. We have a digital gallery which exhibits contemporary video artwork. We often do demonstrations in AR and VR, and it's not just about like the consumer side of those products, but it's also about developing the community's literacies and understandings, and giving them ways to be creative and creatively engaged with the tools of production.
Wow, I'd like to explore that a little bit more. But before that, can you tell us a bit about your background? Are you a teacher
No, I'm not.
training?
I don't really have. If I said that I originally trained as an artist, I think that kind of gives you an idea of the kind of, it's the creative and community engagement impulse that kind of rules my career progression.
But tell us about your art.
I don't make any anymore, but I've been a youth worker, and I've worked in disadvantaged and Indigenous communities. I've worked at the Powerhouse Museum, doing web project management and outreach and training around digital technologies for people working in the collection sector. I also worked in the Thinkspace team there, where I was the Thinkspace Manager. So that was like running the Powerhouse Museum's digital programs for school students and for children and adults in the school holidays and that kind of thing. So for me, this has come about. I'm just really interested in technology, and I mean, I guess all those years ago, my training was as a media artist. Correct. I went to university to study creative writing, and then bumped into video and the early HTML and web stuff and kind of interactives and sound art and stuff, and switched into that stream. So I've always been really interested in the creative potentials of technology, what they can do for us as people and communities, and how we can use them to kind of, shape our world and communicate better with each other.
Wow. So how did that bring you to the Canada Bay Library? Because actually, can you tell us about what your role is in the library, and how you say your past life connects to what you're doing now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Peter. One I don't think about very often. For me, I guess everything, if you have a look, the through lines in my kind of work and career choices have always been around communities, people, technology, and ways that we can empower people with those. City of Canada Bay was setting up this facility here and knew that the traditional approach that libraries take was something that they wanted to kind of transform and move away from, and so they were looking for someone who had a different skill set and a different set of experience to kind of head that up for them. And it's a really good fit for me, because the very vague ideas that they had were like, let's get a robot and maybe let's do 3D printing, and I was bursting with ideas about, I'd been working with Save the Children as a digital program manager, but also in my own business at that time, consulting to libraries, schools and community organisations about how to do digital engagement with, community. And, and then I just thought, hang on a second, a building, a budget, a team, a fresh slate, a fantastic community to come and work in. It kind of sounded almost too good to be true, and but it wasn't. It was real, and I've been doing it now for 2 years, and so that's been a really excellent experience.
So how did you go about setting up the space?
Well, I mean, to a large extent, the building, it's part of the learning space here is part of City of Canada Bay's cultural precinct in Rhodes called The Connection. So it's part of a larger project, but we do have a 700 square metre building, and I've been lucky enough in that there's, a lot of the detail was thought out already in terms of things like black fibre internet, and this building has like more PowerPoints than you can throw a stick at, and that's been really great, and I've added even more because, that's the way it has to be. There's never enough, especially in an environment where everyone's bringing their own device, and also USB power as well as regular PowerPoints, and good AV and smart building and kind of, do you know what I mean? Like, so the structure, the actual building was very well thought out, very well developed. I've got a lovely open space with a view over Homebush Bay where people can come and work and study and do that, traditional use of the library as a space for their own learning and work and recreation. But then I've also got some really nice classroom and studio space within the building as well. And it was very much a blank canvas. So I started thinking about, well, I actually took the approach of what is the community here? What programs can I use to engage them with themselves and with their own learning and with each other? And started to think through that, and then that kind of guided an approach to equipment and setup. So I guess my background is in community programs, and so I started with that and allowed that to dictate how we use the spaces. Buying a very nice large 3D printer that's enclosed and that prints at a good quality for the bench that's out there in the open space, that when you walk in the door you see it right away.
Yep.
And it's printing and those prints are on display. But then having other printers in a kind of more makerspace setup, and I wouldn't say we have a makerspace, but we have a lot of the elements of a makerspace, if that makes sense. And so having other 3D printers, having other tools, having other things for digital production like MacBooks and iPads and, good quality cameras and sound recording equipment to do video and content production and so on. And so just thinking through what kind of programs we wanted to run and what would be the appropriate technologies to take those to the community.
What differentiates you from a makerspace?
If you ask the library sector, they seem to imagine that I have a makerspace here. And I guess we run programs that are maker programs for sure. But for me, a true makerspace is a space that you can access if you're a member of it, you can access it freely at any time, and that it's actually kind of run that has that membership involvement. And we're not quite at that stage yet, and I would say that we are working towards it slowly, and some of our programs are starting to have that feel within the times that they operate. But that as a true makerspace where I can say to people, look, you have access to this space to use however you like, whenever you like. That I don't know how far along the road we will get to that true definition of in my mind, that definition of makerspace. And I guess for me that comes out of my involvement over a couple of years with the Makers Place makerspace in Sydney. And being on the board of that and being an active member of that for several years, that has informed my understanding of that style of makerspace.
Then what are your hurdles to getting to that point, if you can ever get to that point?
Yeah, well, one of them is just actually being a public library. The way you engage and interact with the public is quite mediated, and you're expected to mediate to some extent. So, and that's part of it. Another thing is it's not kind of it's a part of our core business, but it's not our core business in a way, if that makes sense. It's a part of a bigger offering. It's not the only thing we do. So, and the other thing is just about understanding the community that I'm in here in Rhodes and what their needs are and how to grow and learn alongside them. And I think they're driving that growth. They're actually driving our development now. They're driving our program development through their interest in their feedback and what they bring into our programs, and the community is also driving kind of the directions we're heading at in the ways that we're engaging with them. So they still, for example, our 3D print club is one of those spaces that has that maker feel to it. And Vincent, the staff member who's the full-time program officer here, who looks after that every week, he's the facilitator of that workshop weekly. He pulls back as much as he can, but that group likes that mediation, likes that facilitation. That's still a very open space that they can bring their ideas and their projects to, but a lot of people are coming into it as beginners, and it's very comfortable for them to have, a weekly object lesson that Vincent's prepared, or, to have his facilitation in pairing them up with someone or whatever. So that's that kind of growth that I'm talking about. But that group meets weekly on Monday nights at 6:30, and it's really a very diverse and lovely atmosphere to come and learn about CAD and 3D printing.
So we're just riffing on that one. How did you guys start up the club, and how did you actually reach the community and get them to become involved in the club?
Yeah, so we were fortunate in that because we were part of this new community facility that was opening, Council did put quite a bit of resource towards promoting, an open day and so on. We have a fabulous location, I would say unbeatable. We're on the ground floor, and we've got these big open doors and windows, and we're right in a very heavy pedestrian traffic area for a suburb that likes to walk and be on bikes and be out and about. So we attract, so that's the first kind of, there's a bit of a honeypot factor going on. But then once people are here, there's a community engagement strategy and approach which we implemented very, very early on, from even before we came to this site, which was at Concord and 5 Dock Libraries, we ran introduction to CAD workshops, and I actually had the 3D printer at Concord Library and ran, public workshops, public talks, and we advertised that quite heavily, and the printer was operating, and I would walk out and talk to anyone who wanted to know about it at any time.
Awesome. How did you advertise that? Like on Facebook or in printed media?
Council newsletter?
I'll be honest with you, one of the real joys of, or one of the real advantages of working in something like a public library is it's such an unbeatable brand with an audience that's already in place. And so if you can understand what they need, you can have quite good access. So, for example, our library e-news gets the best, click-throughs of any kind of email publication that I've ever seen or come across. And we do also do some Facebook promotion and so on. But the other thing I have to say to you, Peter and Marcus, was our actual physical presence and talking to people in the space. Making sure that everyone who walks through the door understands and leaves with an invitation to one of our programs, whether it's 3D Print Club or a multicultural story time for their children or whatever the case may be. So we always make sure we extend an invitation to every person who walks through the door, and most adults would get an invitation to our 3D Print Club. So that's been really important to make it feel accessible and warm, and something like if you've never seen a 3D printer before but you spend 5 minutes with us and you want to know more, here's how you can find out.
Just a pleasure to do it.
That is so cool. So just wondering, how did you get people to walk through? I know it sounds like I'm tunneling, but you are quite unique in that you've got not a library not a collection of books, not something that somebody would traditionally go to. Yeah, a library without books. What was drawing them into the facility?
Well, I mean, firstly, a lot of the promotion and the advertising. We are right on, our location here is excellent. So we are on Homebush Bay, and I don't know if you know this area at all, but there are walking tracks and very popular walking tracks and cycling tracks that come through the middle of our site. There's a very large cafe restaurant which is 5 to 10 metres from our front door, but also the connection also has meeting and event spaces that are available for public hire. And they themselves are very architecturally beautiful buildings, and the openness of them means that when people walk past, the design kind of makes them stop and sometimes even come in. And on a hot day like today, they come in for toilets and air conditioning, but they'll leave with an invitation to toilet.
Get some extra.
So build it and then we'll come.
Yeah, but also, there's actually between 50 and 60 people out there studying right now. We do have regular visitors, and it's not a busy day. It's the middle of January.
Yeah, Friday.
And there would have been 50 or 60 people through here today.
For our international audience, Homebush Bay is the site of the Olympic venues. It's where the Sydney 2000 Olympics took place. So are you in close proximity to those sites?
Yeah, we're probably about a 25-minute walk away from those sites, and definitely they are on the other side of the bay. So when you stand on the side of the connection, you can actually see them across the bay.
It's a beautiful area.
Yeah, and it's very, very popular for cyclists and so on. The other thing about Rhodes is that it's a high-rise, high-density community, and that people are quite often walking. And not only they are walking recreationally through this area and through this site because it's one of the shortcuts through the area, but also they're walking like to get places too.
So like some good planning.
Yeah, so if I understand right, like obviously the location is amazing, but the main difference why it's been successful is that the people that are part of the library. So people walk in and with the intention of, I suppose, escaping the heat, and then they come out with an invitation to learn about 3D printing. So that comes down to the people that you have. So could you tell us a bit about the people in the library, perhaps what roles they have, like are they mentors or teachers of some kind of technical skill or artists, or, tell us a bit about them. And then I'd like to know what is a typical scenario of, say, a visitor to the library coming in, wanting to do a bit of 3D printing or something else, perhaps participating in a workshop. What does that look like from the point of view of the client?
Yeah, sure. So look, I can't speak highly enough of my staff here, to be honest with you. And I know a lot of people will say that, but yeah, they're terrific. And they do have a variety of backgrounds, but there are two main themes. Firstly, when I first started on this project, I found already working in City of Canada Bay libraries. So there's actual proper libraries at Concord and Five Dock with physical collections. Don't believe I just said proper, but you know what I mean. What you would expect when you
traditional
library, traditional and very beautiful and really up to date and lovely libraries that are very very fortunate to have walked into a service that has that kind of that as a starting point, which is tremendous. And not only did I find my colleagues in the libraries to be, kind of open and really curious and wanting to support what we were going to embark on here. But I also found two library staff members, one of whom was a student in mechatronics engineering in his last year, working as a casual library assistant. Yeah. So basically just doing customer service and putting away the books. And another one who is an overseas trained engineer from Iraq. And so they actually turned up, electrical engineer even, to make it more perfect. So they actually turned up as my first staff members, because before I could hire anyone, I had a lot of work to do, but I also wanted to start piloting my programs right away, and they were the first two people to start working alongside me. So when I discovered their skill sets, I was like, yes, these people are going to help me, and then it was a natural transition to bring these people onto the team here at the Learning Space. The rest of the team here are a really interesting bunch, and I would say to you that they're all actually contemporary art practitioners with flourishing practices in kind of temporal, multidisciplinary, screen-based art, that kind of really amorphous stuff. They've exhibited at the MCA and places like that. Right. They've got artistic practices in their own right. And they may not necessarily be, some of them are, but they may not necessarily be experts in coding, but they can turn their hand to it and they can communicate, they can find interesting things to do and communicate those, and are willing to kind of experiment and learn alongside the community.
Do they pass on those skills and passions to the visitors through
very
workshops?
Much so. That's the trick. That's actually the trick of the whole thing. And it's because they're artists, they're communicators, they're inspired, they're interested in ideas. They don't see an obstacle, they see a challenge. And with my background in training, I really understand this impulse and really enjoy working with it, and to some extent have it myself, so it makes a good match for us. So, and also the creativity that we bring and the ability to make things accessible to people.
What is a typical customer? I don't know if that's the right word to call them, but what's a typical customer that walks through the doors?
What do you call them?
Yeah, what do you call
What do you actually call them internally within the
I
library?
call them, well, interesting. There's many different names that they're given, depending on who you are and what your interaction with them would be. Here we like to call them our visitors and workshop participants.
Mm-hmm. So what's the average age, gender, objectives of if there is such an average?
There isn't really, because there's such a diversity. Well,
give us a range of people that you see. Yeah.
Well, as a library service, there's a real diversity to what we're doing, not just this STEAM and emerging technology stuff. So, for example, if you're here on Wednesday morning, you'll be probably here for baby rhyme time, where you'll find approximately 60 to 70 babies with their carers. So that's over 120 participants each week in that program of singing and action-based learning for children 0 to 1 years old. So that's probably our biggest program, to be completely honest with you. If you were to come in on Monday night, you would come across 3D Print Club at 6:30 p.m. And that is a really diverse audience. So you might find one of our participants is a pharmaceutical rep who didn't know anything about 3D printing, but lived locally, 5 minutes walk away, and decided that this was something she'd be interested in learning about, and also a way to connect and be connected to this community. She comes quite regularly and is actually quite skilled now after, a good 12 months of attending, not weekly, but regularly. And she's actually quite a skilled CAD modeller now and takes the lead in showing new people how to get started in Fusion 360, which is what we use here. And
is there an objective that she has, or it's just curiosity? For example, I'm thinking a lot of people want to learn 3D printing because they've got this product idea and they want to learn how to design it so they can manufacture it. Is there any such...
No, she doesn't have that, but other people do. That would be the next thing I would say to you. So we also get people with exposure to CAD or industrial processes, fabrication processes from other realms, but who might be new to 3D printing, coming in and wanting to transfer that skill set and going, look, I want to, I've got this idea for a hook on my balcony to hold up my Christmas lights. It should look like this. Can you help me with that? And,
Any school kids, perhaps?
Yeah.
You've got a project to work on?
Sometimes we do get school kids in the 3D Print Club. I guess for us, the main target audience of the 3D Print Club is adults. And we found that particularly children under about 13 or 14 had a different energy and brought a different energy to that print club, which didn't sit comfortably sometimes. So,
have you considered diplomacy? That's so well said.
We actually have... look, honestly, Marcus, we actually have a lot of school holiday programs, and that's where we see children and young people participating, and we do a lot of things specifically for them. This is the program which is specifically for adults. Now, if there is a young person who can hold their own and be comfortable in that, we never tell a kid not to come in. Yeah. We just don't tailor it to them. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense.
If they're sitting alongside and they're doing well, and there's actually a family group that comes, oh yeah, they're so cool. They started showing up last year. So that's a family group with a father, a mother, an uncle, and 3 kids ages 8 to 14, and they come together.
Wow. Well, that's cool.
So to switch slightly, I'm just curious about the kind of library that you are. You're not the traditional library. I call it a library with a twist.
Thanks.
From what you know from your colleagues around Australia, perhaps internationally, is there a trend for libraries to become, a lot more freestyled, designed, away from the traditional physical book to more like activity-driven, workshop-driven digital books? Is there a trend you see there?
And to piggyback on that question, who else is doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first part of the question is yes, there is a trend. Over the last 10 to 15 years, libraries have increased the amount of programming they do and the diversity of their programming. There's no doubt. And there are libraries all over Sydney all over Australia really, running STEM style activities, whether they run them like us, whether they have there's not many, I don't think, who would have a team running them internally like we are. But whether they contract it in or whether they partner with organisations who can provide that service for their community, that is something nationally and internationally. If you have a look, the world leaders in this stuff are probably Chattanooga Public Library in the US. Mm-hmm. And they have a makerspace, but they also have a community kitchen and some really amazing innovation in the way that they engage their community in their library.
What are they doing that makes them different to, I guess, other libraries? What makes them special?
Chattanooga, for example. Could you tell us a bit about it?
It's the community programming.
All right.
And the way that they are looking beyond traditional programs to see how they can meet community need. And in a lot of places, this is driven by disadvantage. So one of the interesting things about what we're doing here in Rhodes, or interesting to me anyway, is that quite often innovation in community service delivery comes in disadvantaged areas. It's about providing access to technology and ideas to communities that don't necessarily, because of distance or finance, or knowledge or whatever, don't have access to those things.
Sorry, is that a function of money? So government identifies that this area is not socio-economically well off, will funnel some money into services, and therefore they're able to do better programs?
I'm not really sure about the ins and outs of funding, Marcus, but what I will say is that, for example, it's about identifying need. So if you have communities where people don't have access to computers, then what you find is public libraries with lots of public PCs. Here we have very few public PCs compared to bare desks, because Rhodes is demographically a higher than average income and higher than average level of education, and it's a pretty much BYOD service here. And that's what we concentrate on. We do provide public computers, but compared to the number of visitors that we get, we see relatively little use of them here. So that would be my answer to that question. It's all about what the need.
How do you identify the need, and then after that, how do you go about developing your programs?
Yeah. I stand on the shoulders of some really amazing work here in identifying that need. Council actually does a great job of surveying and asking people, of collecting data and then raw statistics, and then surveying and asking people, what do you think, what do you need? The next thing we do here, we're on the ground every day, and as I said to you, when someone walks through the door, we have a conversation with them, and through those conversations, we get a pretty good idea of what's going on.
So talk to your customers.
Absolutely. Have a conversation. Have a meaningful conversation, and people will give you the information you need, and you won't even have to ask them. It's a conversation, or it comes up naturally in a conversation. Really, you're interested in that, and where do you do that, and how do you do that? And they'll ask you, and if I wanted to do this, how could you help me with that? And if I get that question often enough, then I know that that's a need I need to kind of start looking at and pursuing. Okay. So there's the hard and fast stuff of looking at empirical data, which we do, and which we have access to through council. So that's like one of the lovely things of working in a large organisation. But then it's also that face-to-face investment in understanding your community and meeting them at their need as they come through the door.
What has been some data or insights that have surprised you?
In the surveys?
In the surveys, or in talking to the customers or visitors?
I feel like nothing's very much is going to surprise me these days, because I've been looking at it for so long. But I can tell you something that may have surprised other people, but that didn't surprise us at all here. Last week, the Sydney Morning Herald published an article that said that Rhodes is the most educated suburb according to the 2016 census. Most educated suburb in Australia, has the highest number of people with bachelor's and postgraduate degrees in the country. But I know that.
What's the ratio?
I didn't even think. It did not surprise me at all. In fact, I read the headline and I went, I bet that's Rhodes.
What's the immigration ratio, like in the ratio, like of people living in Rhodes compared to people born in Australia? So I know it's a very diverse place. So every time I visit,
It
it's
is.
just well.
If you give me a second, that article, I'll just Google up that article because that
Yeah,
article
sure,
had the
sure.
exact statistic in it. And there's no point in just making a guess at it when it's
Exactly.
available.
No,
But
it's
you're right. The main language groups we have here are the Chinese languages, so Mandarin, Cantonese, and so on. Korean, Hindi, and Arabic are the main community languages here in Rhodes, but by far the Chinese languages are the main ones. SMH Rhodes, let's Google that up and see. Yep, Census 2016, Sydney's best educated suburb. So if you put SMH Rhodes and census into Google, it'll bring you up this article.
See that data. Okay, brilliant. Well, we will check it out.
Yeah, so I think it's roughly 80% of the population of Rhodes is overseas born. It's very high.
So diverse.
It is really,
really good.
and they actually
No,
did
that's
quite a
fine.
little bit of information about Rhodes in that article.
Yeah.
So you mentioned previously that you were doing some AR and VR work at the library. What have you been doing that in?
There's two things that we do. The first one is just demonstration. And so last year we had a really lovely, we have a digital gallery in our foyer, which is a video wall with a great sound system and some drop-down projector screens on the other side. And we put all sorts of stuff in there. It's currently showing Australian contemporary art that we've got from Art Bank. We also commission work for that space from leading Australian artists. And last year, Andrew Burrell did a very lovely piece of, Sydney-based artist, did a very lovely piece of work for us called Parkland. And it was an AR work where there were all these, he set up like a lovely kind of animated backdrop and a table at the front. And there were all these cards with these kind of, I guess you could call them, blocky, like how Minecraft is all blocks, kind of like,
pixelized.
very lovely kind of characters that had, and as you held them up to as you held their QR codes up to the camera, they appeared on the screen and danced and interacted with each other and played music and so on. So that was an art installation in our digital gallery, which kind of played with that idea and introduced a lot of people to that concept. And we do have a Sony Playstation Vr, which we get out and let people have a go of and so on. But then in terms of creating
develop
content,
for that?
not
one
for the
develop?
PlayStation.
Yeah.
We haven't gone down that road. What we are looking at is later in the year we will have some AR video content workshops coming on board, and we're using Erasmus for those.
Erasmus. Okay. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's quite a well-known platform. It's free to create stuff. It's the publishing where you start paying.
That's where they
So
get
we
you.
figure but that's a good compromise for learning and
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
experimenting and playing. So, if you do create something worthwhile, then you'll make that
wonder-
investment.
So I was wondering, what is your take, or let's call it a prediction, of how education will be affected by augmented reality or virtual reality? And I'm thinking of using those technologies to show kids or learners in general, for example, how chemistry works, where you can actually are part of a chemical reaction, or you're looking at a geographic location, let's say in Canada Bay, and then you can experience how that location changes over the decades or even centuries. Things of that sort. I'm thinking, what's your take on this? If you have, because I do think that you have some experience in the library using those technologies. You mentioned Sony Playstation Vr and a couple of others earlier.
Yeah. Look, I think all of those things are great as long as we remember, and there's things you can do in AR and VR and ways of exploring the world which add to someone's experience and learning, and that's always a plus. I wouldn't like to see that at the expense of the real world, the physical world. I think we need to kind of maintain that relationship. That's why I'm actually more interested in AR than VR, to be completely honest with you. For me, that feels like a much more interesting technology and a much more interesting space to work in. And I guess the other thing I'd say is, it's all very well and good to give our young people and our learners experiences, but I would like to be able to, as we move into those areas, to always keep the focus on allowing them to access the technologies in ways which allow them to be creators as well, not just consumers, and to make sure that whatever we're putting in front of them is not just something for them to consume and interact with, because that is, a real danger, but that also the creative potentials of that technology and ways of understanding the world through these technologies are available to them to make their own content and their own expression, and not make a high barrier to entry in terms of skill or expertise. I mean, I hear a lot of parents say to me, "My kid's really good at computers. He's always on the computer," and I'm like, "Well, your kid actually might just be good at watching YouTube. Actually, that doesn't mean they're good at computers, and it certainly doesn't mean they can code. In fact, what might be happening is you might be creating a super consumer." Rather than a super creator, and for me that's at the heart of everything we do. How do we explain these technologies in ways that break away that kind of veneer of consumerism and give people an insight into how it's being used, and how, if they needed to or wanted to, they could use it, and then behind that, access to the skill sets that allow them to do that.
So always be mindful of the balance between consuming information, which is okay, I suppose, if you want to get facts, like we just Googled, and we found that the 80.1% of the residents in Rhodes are born overseas. So just consume some information, but then that can be balanced by creating something new, right? Mm-hmm. So all these technologies have to serve this.
Yeah, and differentiation of experience, I think, will be the other interesting thing. I mean, you've just pulled out a statistic there that says 80.1% of people in Rhodes are born overseas, but there's an incredible diversity to those people. That's not a homogenous block of 80% versus another 20%.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a great diversity within that of experiences and backgrounds and approaches and to life. And being mindful of that diversity is something I've really learnt in this job in particular, I think. Yeah.
Great. Marcus?
So as we're coming to the end of this wonderful hour, we have a few rapid-fire questions for you. These are just questions that we'll ask quickly, and you can answer as quickly or as... go down a rabbit hole as far as you want to go.
And you can say pass if you don't want to answer.
You can say,
yes, that's a new rule.
We're taking off the political ones, it's fine. So, I guess our first question here is, who has been most influential in shaping the way that you teach?
Could be a real person or a fictional.
Peter Marnie, who is the Education Manager at the Powerhouse Museum, or the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences.
Right?
We've had Peter on 3 episodes ago.
Yeah. I worked with Peter, and I learnt so much working with him.
Peter's great. Oh, awesome. So what advice would you give to educators just starting out? So specifically STEM educators.
Yeah. Find something that interests you, and find out how to do it quickly and easily, and then put that quickly into the hands of the people you're educating to make themselves, and go from that point. Don't start from where you think the beginning is. Start from the best bit and communicate that.
So what do you mean by best bit?
The most exciting bit.
Oh, right. It's because you want to capture them, right?
That's right, yeah.
Right.
Don't start to teach coding from this is a function and this is a variable. Just whack down a piece of code and go, hey, plug something in, make that work. Cool.
Blinking LED.
Yeah. Don't make them write the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
don't make them learn all the terminology first.
Start from the end.
Get them working on it. Once you got them hooked, the rest will come.
So start with the end in mind.
Is it a Peter Marnie thing? Because I noticed that a lot of the stuff that he creates is really throwing them into the deep end, where they just, I guess, plug bits into holes.
Yes, it could be. It could be. We have similar approaches, I would imagine, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Sorry. I'm forgetting that we're in rapid fire.
Right.
Yes.
So what professional development have you found most useful in the last year?
There could be seminars, workshops, conferences that you've been to that you want to go back.
Screencasts, online
Online
I'm going to give you a book
Oh,
Hang on a second. Yeah, I know. But it was actually the most useful, and it's not because I work in a public library service. I'm actually really surprised that I'm giving this answer.
Physical?
No, well, I bought a physical copy because I made the library put it in the collection. The new book from Mitch Resnick, who is the head of the MIT Lifelong Kindergarten, who developed Scratch. Lifelong Kindergarten, cultivating creativity through projects, passion, peers and play. You know, to me that's just like, all the perfect things.
Well,
You are the second person to mention this book.
Yeah.
So it must be. I have to admit I have not read it yet, but
I've got to
we
get
have
to do it now.
But if you're not going to read the book, because some people aren't, then you should see Mitch Resnick's TED Talk, which I think is called Teaching Kids to Code.
Great. Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. I think I have seen that one. So my next question is, I love this one. What is your programming language of choice?
I knew you'd ask that.
These days it's
gift to
Python.
programming?
Oh, look, I'm not really great with programming, but we've been using the BBC microbits in our coding and programming workshops here this summer, and that's been phenomenal for us. And the Python stuff, kids are really getting into Python, and if you do it right, they love that it's a real language.
Yeah, it is a real language.
And it also works on our Now robot. We have one of those Now humanoid robots, and you can use Python on those. So for us here at the moment, and for me personally, there's a little bit of a romance with Python.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I understand that.
I've got to give a shout out to the microbit guys because they do such a good job. When you do the coding, it actually goes both ways. Whereas with...
And you mean between Scratch or the block language?
the block language and the real language.
Right?
Whereas you don't get this with, I guess, other offerings.
With imports, you don't. It's typically one way around.
Yep. So I thought it was very clever.
Thank you very much, Joy. So if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that? Are you on social media?
You know what? I'm just going to give you an email address because that's... let's keep it old school.
All right, you don't do real-time communication, then you...
Asynchronous.
It's asynchronous.
Look, I'll be honest with you, in the role that I'm in now, that's the... if you'd have asked me this question 2 years ago when I was running my own business, I would have given you a whole raft of social media. But at the moment, I'm in a structure where email's my main form of communication.
Okay,
so it's just all about where you're at and what you need to use at that moment in time.
Yeah. No problem.
That's pretty practical.
So is it okay?
So that's the thing I'm looking at all day. That's the thing I'm most likely to get back to you on.
No problem. Yep. Is it okay if we list that in our show notes for this episode?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
that's
awesome.
okay if you list that in the notes.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Joy.
Thank
it was
you so much.
A real pleasure.
Right.
Thank you for your time. I'd like to come and visit you, definitely. Like, you guys are around
Absolutely.
the corner. Oh, not literally, but relatively close for Sydney.
Relatively close.
You'd be surprised. It's a location that's relatively close to a lot of places.
Yeah.
It's really central.
It is.
So, yeah. It's been lovely to chat with you guys. Thank you for the opportunity to, to reflect on what we do here in the practice and the good questions that help me do that. So thank you.
Awesome to be a pioneer.
I'd say...
That's all for this episode. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to our email address, questions@stemiverse.com, and we'd be happy to answer them. Do you want us to interview someone in particular? Let us know. Visit us at stemiverse.com to get the show notes of every episode. And subscribe on iTunes by searching for the name of our podcast, Stemiverse. That is STEMIVERSE. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.